Welcome. It is Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz, Ben Ferguson with you. And Senator, there are certain shows when we get ready and we're getting everything in line before the show, you just say, yeah, this is an important one. We've got two big topics we're going to be talking about, including the big backfire by Democrats.
Yeah, so today is day 6 of the Schumer shutdown. And I got to say, it is not going well for Democrats. Democrats are panicking. The American people recognize that they have shut the government down in an act of petulance, in an act of Chuck Schumer trying to cover his left wing with the crazy activists in his party. And the Democrats don't have an out, and it's not going well. The American people get the joke. We're going to break that down and tell you how this is going to end, and it is going to end. And spoiler alert, it's going to end with complete and total capitulation from the Democrats, which is part of why Schumer and the Democrats are panicking, because they don't see an alternative to that. Secondly, we're going to talk about a story from this past week that, to be honest, just pisses me off. Really made me angry when it broke, which is the deranged killer who went from California to Maryland to murder Justice Brett Kavanaugh. He was sentenced this week. DOJ sought 30 years for an attempted murder of a Supreme Court justice, a very reasonable sentence. A Biden left-wing judge instead deviated downwards 22 years, sentenced him to just 8 years. Why? Because the murderer is transgender. And so it's okay, apparently, from the left-wing's view. If you are trying to assassinate a sitting Supreme Court justice, if you happen to be transgender, their woke politics trumps any sense of law and order or justice. It's an outrageous story. We're going to give you all the details.
If you've ever listened to the show before, you know I'm a big advocate for the Second Amendment, and I've shared on numerous occasions how carrying a firearm literally saved my life from a gang-related attack. But many of you out there may not feel comfortable carrying a firearm. Maybe you have a loved one that's just not comfortable. They need a way to protect themselves. And that's why I want you to know about Byrna launchers. I have them, and I've given them to many family members. Byrna is a handheld pistol that fires both kinetic rounds and chemical irritants to separate you from an attacker. Josh Sherrard from Byrna has been with us telling stories of how Byrna has helped save lives or could have been the best option for protection. Josh, this next one is incredibly sad, and I want you to talk about a father that was involved with a shooting.
Absolutely. So in this particular case, a 16-year-old girl was coming home late one night, about 3 a.m. in the morning, entering through the garage. Unfortunately, the father hears a noise in the garage, grabs his gun, goes out there, sees a dark figure walking through the garage, points that gun, fires, only that point realizing that he had just killed his 16-year-old daughter. This is an illustration of where guns in homes, if not used properly, can have dire consequences. In this case, one bullet killed 2 lives, and the lives of many others in that family. It was incredibly tragic. And unfortunately, we see this situation dozens and dozens of times every year throughout the U.S.
Yeah, that's one of the questions that I think some people ask is like, is this just a one-off occurrence? It would never happen to me. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, this happens a lot more often than people realize.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, people think that the best tool and the only tool for home defense is a gun. And they get a gun, they never train with it, they never train the tactics it requires, they don't do the other things like flashlights and all the other things that are necessary to make sure that they can use that gun properly. And then that's when you have something like this happen. With a Byrna, if the same thing had happened, you put a Byrna in his hand, his daughter would be really mad after she was done coughing for about 45 minutes, but still alive.
Yeah. If you want to get more information on how Byrna can help you or a family member protect themselves, go to Byrna, BYRNA.com. That's Byrna, BYRNA.com. Again, Byrna, BYRNA.com. All right, so Senator, let's take a moment and update people on where we are with this government shutdown. I was literally at church on Sunday, and I had countless people walk up, and they're like, dude, how long is this going to last? When's this going to end? Is this going to be a really long-term shutdown, or is this going to be something that's going to get resolved pretty quickly? So let's talk about you in Washington last week. There were votes and movement, but it did not move enough to make the government go back to actually working for the American people. When you left D.C., what was the temperature? And you said now Democrats, you feel like, are actually freaking out.
Yeah, look, I and every other Republican has voted repeatedly to open up the government. The House of Representatives has passed a clean CR, a clean continuing resolution that keeps the government open. And it's the Democrats who keep voting it down. And we're going to this week, we're going to be back in. We'll be in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe Friday. Every day, we will vote to open the government. Right now, if the Democrats don't change, every day the Democrats will vote to keep the government shut down. And the challenge is they don't have an off-ramp. They're trying to make up all sorts of things to say, we're going to shut the government down because of X, because of Y. They're claiming it's all about that they really, really, really want to give health care to illegal aliens. Actually, ironically, they're not claiming that. That's in the language of the bill they keep voting for. So every Democrat keeps voting for a bill that would provide government-provided health care for illegals. And then they're going on TV saying, what? Us? No. We don't want health care for illegals. Who's ever heard of such a thing? That's not possibly what we want. So there's a level of incoherence in terms of what their ask is. But there's a reason for that. They don't actually have a real ask. What they have is a political problem for Chuck Schumer. When he last kept the government open, he came very close to losing his job. The radical left wing rose up. They were furious. I got to say, Ben, it is astonishing. Every single Democrat Senate candidate in the country who has been asked, do you support Chuck Schumer to remain the Democrat leader in the Senate? Not one, not a single incumbent, not a single challenger has said, yep, he's our leader. They're all running terrified. So you want to know why there's a shutdown? Because Schumer needs to beat his chest. Now, at some point, he'll stop beating his chest and the government will reopen. But just this week, CBS did a poll. And I got to say, the Democrats' numbers are near an all-time low. The Democrats' favorability rating is at 34%, 66% unfavorable. And it really is striking. So CBS, now this is not a right-wing poll, this is CBS. CBS asked, what words describe the Democrat Party? What do you think the number one word was?
I'm going to guess it wasn't like inspirational, like hope and change back in the day when Obama was around.
Weak.
There you go.
Weak. Weak was 64% of Americans polled said the Democrat Party is weak. What do you think the number two word was?
I'm going to go with not strong.
Extreme. 46% said extreme. So weak and extreme are the top two words. Now, after that, you've got reasonable. Reasonable is at 44%. Strong, you actually asked about strong. What percent do you think say the Democrat Party is strong?
I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say 35%.
27.
Wow, so even lower than I thought, because 35 was not like a good number, by the way.
And by the way, effective, what percent do you think say the Democrat Party is effective?
I'm going to say, if based on what you just said a moment ago, 25%?
26.
There you go. Okay, good.
So, all right, think for a minute. You are running the Democrat Party Senate campaign, the Democrat Party House campaign. Your message right now, 2/3 of Americans think we're weak. Half of Americans think we're extreme. We've got a full quarter of Americans who think we're strong and effective. So we're telling you, quarter of Americans, we are strong and effective. Everyone else, you know, we're full of crap. That is the definition of a political crisis. You want to know why my colleagues are nervous? Look, this past week, I sent out a meme. So you may have seen, in fact, I know you've seen, Ben, President Trump sent out a meme of Hakeem Jeffries wearing a sombrero with a big handlebar mustache.
By the way, so good and hilarious and just funny, and people need to calm down. But of course, Democrats start screaming racism right away.
Look, it was funny as crap. It was AI. So it had Chuck Schumer saying, all right, nobody's voting for Democrats because they know our BS. But I have to admit, I doubled over laughing. And look, it's obviously AI. Nobody thinks
it's real. Yeah, it's
Schumer actually
humor.
said we, the Democrats, are full of crap. Like, it's obvious they're lying. But what people have gone nuts about is Hakeem Jeffries is there. They're saying, okay, nobody votes for us. Everyone hates us. So we've decided to go all in on free health care for illegals because maybe the illegals, they don't speak English, so maybe they'll support us at least for a while till they discover how horrible we are, and then they won't support us either. That's a paraphrase of what Schumer says in the video. and you have Hakeem Jeffries in a sombrero and a big mustachio next to him. And I have to admit, my team, we took a video. There are 44 Democrats who keep voting to shut the government down. So we took pictures of all 44 of those Democrat senators. And we used a little bit of AI, and we stuck sombreros and big old mustaches on them. And we put it out, and we put it out. Actually, I want to play the tune, and we're not going to play the whole thing, but I want to play the tune that we put it out to because it's very neutral and non-political. Give a listen to the song that we put out, and mind you, while you're listening to this song, you have a cascade of 44 Democrat senators with sombreros and big handlebar mustaches. Give a listen.
Campbell is never gonna beat me in November. Donna's gonna make the country better than you can remember. Campbell is never gonna beat me in November. Hey, Macarena. Campbell is never gonna beat me in November. Donna's gonna make the country better than you can remember. Campbell is never gonna beat me in November. Hey, Macarena. When I dance, I do the Macarena. Shake it on my trailer campaign now. They all love me, cause I'm Dante, and every good American wants me. Votes for me, Joe just beat on himself the third time this week. Votes for me, Joe just beat on himself the third time this week. Campbell is never gonna beat me in November. Donna's gonna make the country better than you can remember.
All right, I gotta say, you know that Donald Trump loves this kind of stuff. I cannot wait to see what he says to you when you guys hang out next.
Look, it's hysterical. And you got to envision, if you haven't watched it online, while the song is playing, we've just got image after image of Democrats. So we have Chris Van Hollen sitting down with the MS-13 member having a daiquiri with a giant sombrero and a handlebar mustache. We just have fun with it. By the way, I will say the Macarena. So as you know, my communications director is named Macarena Martinez. She's fantastic, really, really good. But I was talking to like several of the young staffers in my office, and I said, you know, there's only one member of our staff who has been the title of a #1 song worldwide. And like the 22-year-olds in my office had no idea what I was talking about.
Isn't that amazing? You're aging us right now.
Yeah, like it's for all of us. So this pod has a lot of younger listeners. There was a song, 20 years ago, 25, long time ago.
Yeah, longer than that maybe, yeah.
That was the Macarena, and there was a dance. I will say, if you've never seen it, there's an image you don't want to see of Hillary Clinton dancing the Macarena.
It is amazing.
It will make you feel like the gif of Homer Simpson wanting to pour bleach in your eyes. You do not want to see Hillary. Trust me, do not Google Hillary Clinton dancing the Macarena. You will never be the same.
Was that at the Democratic convention? I'm having a flashback right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was.
I don't
and they
remember
were trying to be
which
cool,
year it
right?
was, but
and it
it was
just
at one of them.
completely backfired.
It was horrible. Now, I will tell you, when I sent out this video of all the Democrats, Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia, who Tim and I are friends, but he like popped me back on Twitter. And he's like, hey, did you buy those sombreros in Cancun? Which I immediately responded, yes, I did. And by the way, Tim, instead of making dumb jokes about Cancun, how about we reopen the government, since half of your friggin' state, Virginia, works for the government, and you've taken away all their paychecks. And he didn't like that. So I will say, on the Senate floor, I was giving Tim a little bit of grief for that. And he was like, do you like my Cancun joke? And I'm like, yeah, but I'd like it better if you open the government.
If you open the government. So, all right, look into your crystal ball. Based on what it was, what D.C. was like in the mood when you left, and going back in there on Monday, do you think that we will get the government reopened this week, or do you think that Schumer is going to still dig in?
No, I think they caved this week, and I want to play for you. So last week, Schumer was on the Senate floor, and I want to paint the picture. He's giving a speech for one of the multiple times the Democrats are voting to shut the government down, and they know the polling is going terribly. And so Schumer got up and his line, he said, well, okay, there are polls that Republicans are talking about, but those are biased Republican polls. And he says, well, it's the New York Times, but it's biased. And I got to say, I was standing 10 feet away from Schumer, And I and every other Republican just cracked up laughing because he's like claiming the New York Times is a biased right-wing publication. And it was spontaneous. We did not organize this. We just like doubled over laughing. And Schumer, he stammered, he stopped. He's like, I mean, it was, look, who knew Schumer could be so funny? I want you to play. The video is better, but I want you to play the audio of Schumer saying this and the spontaneous reaction of peals of laughter on the Senate floor.
Now, I know the leader is going to show a poll that says that Democrats will be blamed for the shutdown. There are many more polls that show Republicans are blamed. The question in that poll is biased. Biased. In the New York Times, but it's biased. If you turn the... That's true. I don't always believe the New York Times. You can be sure of that. Neither do you. Okay. Now,
it's amazing, by the way. Like, you hear him there, and it's kind of like he realized he stepped in it, and even his grin
he was
to
thrown
you guys.
off. He really was. Like, I'm standing 10 feet from him, and all of us, okay, the microphone on the Senate floor, when you're speaking, you have a little microphone on your lapel.
Yeah.
Nobody else is mic'd. That gives you a sense of how loud the laughter was. That's all coming through Schumer's mic, and we were just doubled over laughing. And you watch his expression. He's like, wait, okay, that's really dumb. Oh, crap. Yeah, okay, the New York Times is a right-wing biased publication. Yeah, maybe that's not, like, this is why my prediction is the shutdown will end this week. Because I think the Democrats, as much as Schumer feels he's in trouble with the left wing, I think a lot of the Democrats say, we're on fire. We don't have a win. This is not going well. There's a combination of two things. One, an awful lot of Americans, the government is shut down and they don't care. It doesn't impact their lives. That is the nightmare for any big government Democrat, is if the government shuts down and nobody notices. And look, during a government shutdown, 83% of the government keeps functioning. So the military functions, law enforcement functions, the FBI functions, the Border Patrol functions, ICE functions, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all of that function. VA benefits continue. And so it is a nightmare if your entire political career is built on telling the American people the most important thing in your life is the federal government. If the government shuts down and everyone yawns and goes about their life, that's a disaster. But a second disaster is to the extent people are focused. So listen, if you're going to D.C. this week and you wanted to go to the Smithsonian and go see the Air and Space Museum, you can't, because the Democrats shut down the Smithsonian. They shut down Yellowstone National Park and all the national parks. And so people are going to get pissed off gradually over time. But I think the vast majority of people are blaming the Democrats, saying, why are they shutting this down? And so I think the pressure on Schumer, look, Schumer is a little bit like a cork in a rushing river, where he's just responding to the pressures pushing him left and right. So he's getting the pressures from the crazy left-wingers that are saying, shut it down forever because we hate Trump. But I think a number of his members, particularly members who are on the ballot in 2026, are going to say, all right, enough of this nonsense. Let's reopen the government. My prediction is this week the Democrats give in.
I want to move to another topic that we mentioned earlier, and that is there is a lot of quiet outrage for people that have been paying attention to the Brett Kavanaugh assassination scandal. You have a, quote, transgender man who planned to assassinate Brett Kavanaugh, only receiving 8 years for that crime. There are a lot of people that are upset and angry about it. I'm one of them. I think you are as well. And somehow, I guess, being transgender now allows for you to have less accountability for your actions. Explain this one.
Yeah, I have to admit, this story makes me incredibly angry. When I saw it, I read the news story this week. I was literally yelling out loud as I was reading my phone. Heidi and I and our daughter Caroline, we were in New York this weekend. I was with a half dozen NYPD cops, and I got to admit, I vented to the cops who were all pissed about this. So the man who planned to kill Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh in 2022, He flew from California to Maryland. He arrived there. He had with him, he had a knife, he had a gun, he had duct tape, he had zip ties, and he had planned to murder not just Brett Kavanaugh, but a total of 3 Supreme Court justices. He was deranged. And he was caught on the street right outside Justice Kavanaugh's home. And by the way, he was also threatening Justice Kavanaugh's wife and their 2 daughters. Well, this guy was prosecuted, quite rightly, and the Department of Justice asked for 30 years, which is a pretty reasonable sentence for someone trying to kill a Supreme Court justice. Well, this left-wing judge, her name is Deborah Boardman. She's a Joe Biden appointee to the Maryland Federal Court. She made a 22-year downward departure. So instead of 30 years, she sentenced him to 8 years. And her reasoning was essentially, instead of 30 years, you get 8. Why? Because you're transgender. Here's what Judge Boardman said, quote, "Under the law, I must consider the sentencing guidelines. The guidelines in this case are 360 months to life. It's important to understand the Supreme Court stance on guidelines. They used to be mandatory, but in a case called Booker, the Supreme Court held they were advisory. The judge acknowledged that, quote, this case did involve domestic terrorism, but she undid most of the terrorism enhancement created by the Sentencing Commission and said, quote, I have not seen evidence that the Sentencing Commission relied on evidence that it would reduce recidivism. The sentencing took more than 7 hours, and she discussed at length her justification for the light sentence. Here's what she said. Ms. Roske, of course she calls the man a woman because she's a leftist, Ms. Roske came out to herself, like this is a private, like just in the quiet of night, I've decided I'm a woman. Ms. Roske came out to herself as transgender in 2020, but kept it a secret. Ms. Roske's sister came out as gay 2 years prior, but Ms. Roske saw their parents struggle to recognize her sexuality with their religious beliefs. By the way, it is not subtle or implied. The judge thinks religious beliefs on this are horrible and terrible, and you are bad if you have religious beliefs concerning sexuality. The judge continues, quote, I am heartened that this terrible infraction has helped the Roske family accept their daughter, by which she means Nicholas Roske, for who she is. So, you have someone attempting to murder a sitting Supreme Court justice, and the federal district judge who's sentencing the attempted murderer says, I'm heartened. The great thing about this is the parents are now accepting of their psychopathic, murderous son that thinks he's a daughter. The mother of the murderer told the judge on Friday that, quote, I have attended PFLAG meetings and learned about the LGBTQ plus community. I am committed to going on this journey with Sophie, by which she means her son Nicholas. She was frustrated with what was going on in the world, and we weren't a safe place to process it. And by the way, the Daily Wire in their story, the next sentence says, as his mother wept, Nicholas Roske also choked up, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down. Now, here's what the judge continued saying, quote, any prison time is punishment for her. The length doesn't need to be particularly long. Unduly harsh conditions make a difference too. She will be imprisoned in a male facility, even though she is a transgender prisoner, pursuant to an executive order from the president. Before the executive order, that wasn't the case. In other words, this judge really wanted to send this dude to a woman's prison, where after attempting to murder a sitting Supreme Court justice, he could assault women who were incarcerated. This is, I want to be clear, this is lunacy. This is nuts. I have to admit, I literally yelled and cursed out loud. Listen, number one, Brett Kavanaugh's a friend. I've literally known Brett Kavanaugh for 30 years. His wife, Ashley, Heidi and I were with Ashley on the 2000 George W. Bush campaign. She's a West Texas girl. She's a wonderful woman. They have 2 daughters who went through an utter nightmare going through his confirmation hearing. Night after night after night, the Kavanaugh House, along with the House of every Supreme Court justice, had angry, violent left-wing protesters out front screaming, violating federal law. It is a crime to protest at the home of a justice seeking to change the decision of an opinion. And yet, the Biden Justice Department refused to enforce that law. They would not prosecute those felonies. And the heated rhetoric, look, this is very much like what we're seeing with ICE, where Democrat rhetoric gets the lunatics in their party energized to go commit crimes of violence. I want to be clear. Violence is never, ever, ever justified. So I'm not advocating violence against any Democrat. I'm not advocating violence against any left-wing judges or justices. Violence is wrong. And by the way, when it comes to politically motivated violence, it is almost exclusively a left-wing phenomenon. Look, when George Floyd died, we saw riots in American cities on fire, being burned to the ground. We saw police cars being firebombed. We saw people being murdered. When Charlie Kirk was murdered, we saw prayer vigils across the country as people went out and lit candles and prayed and sang together. And we did see violence, but not from the people supporting Charlie Kirk. Instead, from the same left-wing violent activists who were attacking the people in prayer vigils. There is a difference, and I have to say, this judge has demonstrated she is utterly unfit to be a federal judge. I think the House of Representatives should seriously contemplate impeaching this judge. And I don't.
And by the way, how hard is that, and how
lightly.
often does that happen for what you're describing right now? Because everybody listening is going to be like, hold on a second. If this is the case, then why don't we do it? Does it happen? How many votes do you need to do it? How does that work?
Yeah, it's happened a number of times. There have been multiple federal judges who've been impeached and removed from office. Typically, they are impeached after committing a crime, something like accepting bribes. So Alcee Hastings, for example, was a federal judge who was convicted of accepting bribes as a judge. He was removed from office, and then he turned around and ran for Congress as a Democrat and got elected as a congressman. So he was a Democrat congressman who had been impeached and removed from office for being a federal judge taking bribes. So that I'm going to let you draw all the inferences you want. Those facts are objective. It is not easy to impeach a judge, although under the Constitution, to impeach a judge, it takes a majority vote in the House of Representatives. And I actually think in this instance, a judge who thinks someone trying to murder a Supreme Court justice because he disagrees with a decision the Supreme Court justice is rendering, that is a fundamental assault on our judicial system, on the rule of law, on the basic protection of rights all of us have. And if you are such a zealot, such a partisan ideologue, that you will not follow the sentencing guidelines, you will not acknowledge this is terrorism, and instead you say, you know what, this person's transgender, and my ideology is such that I love transgenders, and so instead of 30 years, I'm going to give this person 8 years. And by the way, I really think this man should be in a woman's prison, but that mean president won't let me do that. I believe, and I don't know this woman at all, I don't know this judge, but just how she conducted herself in this proceeding, to me, demonstrates she is completely unfit to be a federal judge. I would urge the House of Representatives take up impeachment, and I would love to have a trial in the Senate. Do we want judges who refuse to enforce the criminal law for psychopathic murderers who are trying to murder Supreme Court justices? I think the obvious answer is no.
It's also on brand with the American people.
And I can tell you this, no Democrat wants to defend the other side.
Well, and look, it's on brand with the American people right now. They want law and order. They want law and order, and they want justice when the bad guys are caught, which is, there seems to be a pendulum switch that's happening right now, thank goodness, in this country on that.
I think that's right. The American people are sick and tired of Democrats letting criminals go, letting violent murderers go, letting rapists go, letting pedophiles go. They're sick and tired of the Democrats siding with illegal immigrants over the American people. It's why we saw the election result in 2024. But that being said, listen, the corporate media is all in 24 hours a day trying to paint the Trump administration's efforts to keep our communities safe, to lock up bad guys, to apprehend and deport murderers and gangbangers and criminals. What they're trying to say is they're deporting innocent moms who are harmless. And the propaganda effort from the media and the Democrats, it is real and it is dangerous. And if you're not paying close attention, it's easy to believe that propaganda.
Yeah, great point. Don't forget, we do this show Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Hit that subscribe or auto download button wherever you get your podcasts. Also, in those in-between days, grab my podcast, the Ben Ferguson Podcast. We'll keep you up to date there. And the Senator and I will see you back here in a couple of days.